as I said elsewhere, part of the critical thinking skills is the ability of lifting the veil of rhetoric. So it's being able to see beyond the speech, the expressions, the communication, the PR, the numbers, and to exercise our critical thinking when it comes to it. So in that, there is a necessary reflex when we see any kind of speech or debate, which is to see two things. One is the underlying logic. What is sound? What is an evidence? What is logical? What is a demonstration? So it requires a bit of attention to see if the person makes a clear demonstration from A to B to C to D, or, and that's the second layer, are we falling for tricks of rhetoric to convince you because you want to be convinced, because you agree, or because they've manipulated you to a certain extent? So it's not about being paranoid, but it's a bit about being skeptical. In French, we would say rester sur ses gardes. So stay vigilant when anything is being communicated to you. So whether it's on social media, a documentary on TV, even if it's the news, things are always told from a certain perspective. And here, one of the great readings you can have, and that could help you very much deconstruct when someone is trying to win an argument. So it could be used by you in a conversation with someone else. It can be used also when you're watching a debate to detect if the person actually had a better argument or if the person just had a better trick. And here, 19th century philosopher, German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer is a great help. He wrote a very, very short book called The Art of Being Right. It's not always translated like that, but this translation is perfect. In it, he gives us a lot of tricks to win in an argument. That's very much how he wrote that book. It's how to win an argument, but we can use it also to deconstruct the arguments or the speeches and detect if someone is going or is trying to win the argument over us. And I just want to focus very quickly on stratagem number 12. It says, if the conversation turns upon some general conception which has no particular name, but requires some figurative or metaphorical designation, you must begin by choosing the metaphor that is favorable to your position. For instance, the names used to denote the two political parties in Spain, Serviles and Liberates, are obviously chosen by the latter. The name Protestants is chosen by themselves, and also the name Evangelicals, but the Catholics call them heretic. What it's telling us is that if you can speak first, frame the situation, if it's a complex, abstract situation, if it's what he says, he describes as a general situation that doesn't have a concrete metaphor, a concrete picture, paint the picture that is going to help you the most. This is particularly important when we come to what I've called elsewhere a wicked problem, when it's a problem that is so complex, so abstract, so difficult that it's not clear for everyone what it is. There's no clear definition, no clear solution. If you can speak first, or if you can dominate the debate, you can push and frame the narrative in a way that works for you to convince other people or to be right. I'd like to give you an example. As always, we're not just going to push a 19th century German philosopher to a modern day 21st century entrepreneur. But I just want to show you the parallel that we can make. And here I'd like to quickly show an extract of Mark Zuckerberg, since we're talking about Facebook today, who did a speech at Georgian University mid-October in 2019. Facebook was very much in the middle of these issues of fake news, of regulation, and his speech was not just for Georgetown. It was, of course, live streamed on Facebook, and it was recorded and shared, and there was a lot of analysis, and it was on the news everywhere. So it was not just a speech in a university. He knew that he was being listened to, and he very much frames the issue that Facebook is facing in a very specific way. And I want you to watch the video, and then we're going to unpack a little bit what is saying. So let's watch the first couple of minutes, and then debate what is being said really in that video.
Hey everyone! It's really great to be here at Georgetown with all of you today. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that today we lost an icon, Elijah Cummings. He was a powerful voice for equality and for social progress and for bringing people together. Back when I was in college, our country had just gone to war in Iraq. And the mood on our campus was disbelief. A lot of people felt like we were acting without hearing a lot of important perspectives. And the toll on soldiers and their families and our national psyche was severe, yet most of us felt like we were powerless to do anything about it. And I remember feeling that if more people had a voice to share their experiences, then maybe it could have gone differently. And those early years shaped my belief that giving more people a voice gives power to the powerless and pushes society to get better over time. Now, back then, I was just building an early version of Facebook for my community, but I got a chance to see my values and beliefs play out at a smaller scale. When students got to express who they were and what mattered to them, they started more student groups, they organized more businesses, and they even challenged some established ways of doing things around campus. And it taught me the lesson that while a lot of the world often focuses on the big events and institutions, the bigger story is that most progress in our lives actually comes from individuals having more of a voice. So since then, I've focused on building services that do two things: give people a voice and bring people together. And these two simple ideas of voice and inclusion go hand in hand. And we've seen this throughout history, even if it doesn't always seem that way today. More people being able to share their experiences and perspectives has always been necessary to build a more inclusive society. And it is our commitment to each other that we hold each other's right to express ourselves and be heard above our own desire to always get our way in every debate. That's how we make progress together. But this view is increasingly being challenged. Now, some people believe that giving more people a voice is driving division rather than bringing people together. More people across the spectrum believe that achieving the political outcomes that they think matter is more important than every person having a voice and being heard. And I think that that's dangerous. So today, I want to talk about why, and some of the important choices around free expression that I think that we face going forward.
So in this speech, there's a couple of things to notice. First, echoing what we said about Aristotle, there in this ethos, pathos, logos, there is a pathos that is there are emotions that he's playing on, while being genuine. And when he opens on saying that he wants to talk about Elijah Cummings, who's a U.S. senator who had died that week, and he was a major figure in the civil rights movement, someone very important. And there's no reason to doubt that Zuckerberg actually respected and appreciated Senator Cummings. It's just that it sets in the room a certain emotional atmosphere. And then, as someone said, connecting to them, there are students in the room, and he talks about him being a student, establish kind of a connection with the audience. and then mentioning the war in Afghanistan and something a bit traumatic for a lot of people in the US also establishes a kind of an emotional atmosphere, which puts a certain connection between the person talking and people in the room. But that's more about what we said about Aristotle another time. Here, what's interesting, coming back to Schopenhauer's stratagems about framing the situation, is that here Facebook is in the middle of a lot of criticism. There are a lot of issues of the companies. And this is a company, it's not an NGO, it's a social media company, but it's a company that's trying to make money, that is trying to advertise, push advertisement on its platform based on data that it's gathering. So there are a lot of aspects to that situation. But what's very interesting here is that in just a couple of minutes, is making the conversation about democracy and free speech, and not about data privacy and Facebook's potential legal issue. He's not lying. He's not talking about something that has nothing to do with the situation. There is an issue of free speech and accountability on Facebook's platform. He's just framing the conversation as being something else. It is manipulative, but all speech made in order to convince people is on certain level manipulative, whether it's Zuckerberg, an entrepreneur, a politician, or just when you're trying to convince someone, you're trying to change what is in their head. So you're partly trying to manipulate them. It's not necessarily for a bad thing. But here, what's interesting is that it's trying to change the frame of the conversation. And that's very much what Schopenhauer recommends as a stratagem in order to win the argument. Sometimes the table are reversed, and I'd like to show you an extract where our friend Mark is victim of one of the stratagem. We're going to turn to stratagem number 11 in The Art of Being Right by Schopenhauer. If you make an induction and your opponent grants you the particular cases by which it is to be supported, you must refrain from asking him if he also admits to the general truth which issues from the particulars, but introduce it afterwards as a settled and admitted fact. For in the meanwhile, he will himself come to believe that he has admitted it, and the same impression will be received by the audience, because they will remember the many questions as to the particulars and suppose that they must, of course, have attained their end. So let me unpack a little this a bit complicated, tricky advice. The stratagem here is, if you are taking particulars, so examples, not the general points and truth you're trying to establish, but if you're taking specific situations, questions, examples, try to first get your opponent to admit to this particular specific example. Don't jump to the truth that you're trying to establish, because by definition, if the person is your opponent, it means that you have a divergent vision of what the thesis, what the truth is. So instead of saying, do you agree with that big truth that you disagree with, lead the opponent to small particular, small examples, and don't jump to saying, oh, because you agree with that, then you agree with that. List these all small particular examples, and only then jump to your main points. The idea being that it's easier to get someone on board with particular situations, specific situation, than with a general abstract truth. And we're going to watch a very short extract of Mark Zuckerberg when in April 2018, he was called to testify in front of the US Congress. It was a joint hearing from the Judiciary and the Commerce Committees. It's again very much about privacy and data privacy, and in a connection at that time with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and this whole connection between Facebook and and Brexit. But here, what's interesting is you're going to see a senator that is going to ask a couple of specific questions that, in appearance, have nothing to do with Facebook, data privacy, Cambridge Analytica, or Brexit. And by making an analogy with something that has nothing to do with social media and asking some leading question in the sense that it's a question for which you know the answer that is expected, you have no choice, is going to corner him in his defense. I'm not saying that he's right. I just want you to notice how elegant the senator is being here in leading Mark Zuckerberg exactly where he wants to lead him. Let's watch the extract and then we'll unpack a little.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, would you be comfortable sharing with us the name of the hotel you stayed in last night?
No.
If you've messaged anybody this week, would you share with us the names of the people you've messaged?
Senator, no, I would probably not choose to do that publicly here.
I think that may be what this is all about. Your right to privacy, the limits of your right to privacy, and how much you give away in modern America in the name of, quote, connecting people around the world. A question basically of what information Facebook's collecting, who they're sending it to, and whether they ever asked me in advance my permission to do that. Is that a fair thing for a user of Facebook to expect?
Yes, Senator, I think everyone should have control over how their information is used. And as we've talked about in some of the other questions, I think that is laid out in some of the documents. But more importantly, you want to give people control in the product itself. So the most important way that this happens across our services is that every day people come to our services to choose to share photos or send messages. And every single time they choose to share something, they have a control right there about who they want to share it with. But that level of control is extremely important.
They certainly know within the Facebook pages who their friends are, but they may not know, as has happened, and you've conceded this point in the past, that sometimes that information is going way beyond their friends, and sometimes people have made money off of sharing that information. Correct?
Senator, you're referring, I think, to our developer platform. And it may be useful for me to give some background on how we set that up, if that's useful.
I have 3 minutes left, so maybe you can do that for the record, because I have a couple of the questions I'd like to ask.
So here, what is very elegantly done in this exchange with Senator Durbin is that he's moving the frame to another type of metaphor. So he's not making it about Facebook and data of users. It's making it about Zuckerberg and his hotel room. He's making it about Mark and who he has messaged over the past week. So he's moving the frame elsewhere, and he's asking about specific questions that in appearance have nothing to do with Facebook and data privacy. Of course, we know where he's going, and that's why Zuckerberg struggles with the first question. There's a break of a few seconds because Zuckerberg knows that his answer has to be that he doesn't want to share the details of his hotel room, but he knows that if he says, no, I'm not comfortable with that, then he's going to be led to, why are you comfortable with taking the data of your users without them knowing much about it? So the senator is using an analogy and a series of particular questions. What about your phone calls? What about this? What about that? And he's leading him exactly where he wants him. So he's doing an analogy in another sphere that's working very well. He's doing two things that well. First of all, it establishes another kind of emotional climate. So we are back to the pathos element of Aristotle, where all of a sudden people are smiling. He's not looking vindictive, even though he's going to be very critical. He's looking like he's attacking on a gentle side, but also it makes all of the detailed analytic answer by Zuckerberg boring in comparison, is that whatever Mark Zuckerberg is going to say for the next 2 minutes, what is going to stick to our mind is the emotional side that we stick to, which was, oh, that was funny, and he talked about the hotel, and Zuckerberg said, no, oh, it's a contradiction. Again, it's not about who's right, it's about who's convincing. And Aristotle is about the art of rhetoric. The second thing that, the third thing that Senator Durbin does here, he says, you've sold yourself elsewhere that there was an issue. This is another stratagem of Schopenhauer that I will not go into any detail right now, but which is using what your opponent has said in the past against himself or herself. You're saying that today, but 3 months ago, 3 years ago, 30 years ago, you've said something that seems to be a contradiction with that, and I'm going to use it against you. So it was just to show you that rhetoric works both ways, and if you find yourself against someone who has the upper hand one day, you cannot win. It's almost impossible when you are in front of Congress to have the upper hand against the committee that is in front of you.